What's good, everybody, and welcome into the Refinery. And if this is your first time, let me introduce myself. My name is Trey Everett. I am your host of the Refinery. And what the Refinery is just a place for us to come and have these hard conversations, talk about what's ugly in our world, talk about those things that we think have little to no value. We're going to put those things into the refinery, just like we do with gold or silver or oil. Things that on one side of the refinery has no value or very little value. But once it's placed into the refinery, once it's placed in the heat, in the hot oven, it gets hot and broken down, on the other side comes out something that's valuable, that's worth something. And so I believe the same thing can happen here, where we can bring our differences, where we can bring our disagreements into a place where we can have these hard conversations, because I say it all the time that hard conversations, they bring healing. And so we're going to have these hard conversations on the other side. We're going to have some worth and some value, bring something that can make our world even a better place. So come on in. Welcome into the Refinery. So glad to have you. And if you have not yet, please take a moment now to like, subscribe, and share this podcast, this channel, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're watching on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you catch this podcast, make sure that you're liking it, subscribing to it, and sharing it with somebody else. We want to grow this channel. We want to grow this podcast so that the world hears what we got to say. It's not just me. I know for these first few episodes, all you heard was me, but trust me, some guests are coming and they're on the way. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and talk about what we came here to talk about today. And so here we are, 2 weeks after the election. Well, actually 2.5 weeks. Time is definitely flying by. And a lot of us, we're still in our feelings, don't know exactly how to process everything that we've experienced over these past 2.5 weeks. And whether you voted for President-elect, y'all know me. I'm committed to calling him 4547 for the next 4 years. So if you were pro 4547 or you were pro Vice President Harris, there's still a lot that we're all processing, dealing with, trying to get understanding. And even if you're pro 4547, you still have to be shaking your head. And I'll talk about this in a moment with some of these nominations to his cabinet. If you have any common sense, you should be just at least scratching your head a little bit, trying to process exactly what it is that he's doing. But there has been some talk from the left side, and this has gone semi-viral on a few social media platforms, where people are talking about President Joe Biden should resign before the inauguration so that Vice President Harris could be president. And when I saw that, I was like, okay, I know people are in their feelings and just want to see her as president. I get it. But it's also the dumbest thing I ever heard as well. Because she will be, if that were to happen, if President Biden resigned and handed over, the controls to Vice President Harris, she would be exactly what President Biden is right now. A lame duck president. A lame duck president, because we're at a point right now where nothing that she would propose or be able to, push it into law is not going to become law, because right now we have a lame duck session of Congress. The holidays are here. They're going to be away from DC. They're not going to do anything. And especially with President Trump trying, I use his name, President-elect 4547, trying to push a recess so that he could push through all of his nominees without any congressional hearings. Nothing's going to happen in DC over the next few months. You can guarantee that. So I really think that we should do away with that entire notion that President Biden resigns just so that we can have a President Harris. It's just foolish. And so people are really just pulling at strings right now, figuring out, how can I make myself feel better? Maybe if President Biden resigned and we saw a President Harris, I would feel better. But that's not going to make you feel better, because come January, when 4547 is inaugurated, you're back in your feelings again. And so I started thinking about what the late, great Joe Madison, if those of you who don't know who Joe Madison is, he is a Hall of Fame radio talk show host with decades of experience. He passed away earlier this year. But it was just a phenomenal radio talk show host. And he would have callers call in and complain and gripe about whatever's going on, whether it's in DC or their local politics or what have you. And instead of him, just saying, yeah, you're right, they're doing the wrong thing and this, that, and the other, he would ask the caller a simple question: what are you going to do about it? And I think that we're all at that point where we should be asking ourselves, what am I going to do about this? I could sit here and be in my feelings all I want, but what exactly am I going to do about it? Because you know what? This is where I give the Republicans some credit. They did something about it. When they lost the 2020 election, they did something about it. They didn't sit and be in their feelings. They said, you know what? It's time for us to get back into the locker room. Let's plan, let's strategize, and let's put something together that's going to get us to a victory in 2024. And so you know what they created? We all know it as Project 2025. As soon as they lost that election, they started putting that playbook together, and they came up with a 900 plus page playbook that we see that they're now running on a daily basis. They're running this playbook. President 4547 can say all he wants that he don't know nothing about Project 2025 all he wants, but he is nominating authors of Project 2025 to his cabinet. So you can't say you don't know nothing about it, but the people who wrote the document are right there by your side on a daily basis. So that Project 2025 is here, and they're going to run this playbook for the next 4 years until they get everything that they want within that document. If you have not read it, I suggest that you do so, or at least read the highlights so that you understand the implications that come with a Project 2025. We see some of the big things like, of course, eliminating anything that has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. We see, the elimination of the Department of Education and the Department of Homeland Security. We see those big things, but there are some intricate details within that document that you should understand and know about, because it affects all of us, and most of us, it won't affect us in a positive way. So make sure that you get your information. So after, understanding that the Republicans did a stellar job in strategizing, putting together their playbook, and running the play to a T flawlessly, I'll give them credit for that. I have to look at the Democrats and say, you know what? You had no playbook. You were on defense the entire time. See, on defense, you're just being reactionary to what the offense is doing. You're just reacting off of the play that the offense is running instead of running your own play. And so that's been the place of the Democrats for a number of years, just being reactive instead of proactive. And so I said, what would happen if, and I'm not talking about the Democrats when I say this, I'm talking about us as people. What would happen if we became proactive? Instead of us relying on the Republicans or the Democrats or anybody in office to run the playbook on our behalf, which, if we're honest, neither side has done a good job of doing that. What if we created our own playbook? And what if we ran the playbook of our lives so that we can have a better life, a prosperous life, no matter who's in office, no matter who's in control of our government? What if we created our own playbook? And so I started thinking about that, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna take a play out of the Republican playbook. They created Project 2025 and is running it perfectly. I said, you know what? Maybe I should create a Project 2029. Instead of sitting here complaining and whining about what happened on election day, why not do like the Republicans and just create a playbook? And so you know what I did? I bought the domain rights to myproject2029.com and .org. And so you'll hear more about that in the coming future. But what this will be is a place for us, the people, to plan, strategize for our most prosperous and best life without reliance on the government, without reliance on who's in office. And so more information about that is coming. With that, it's not just going to be a document that is freely out there for the world to see. No. This is something that you're going to have to subscribe to, that you're going to have to invest in, because what I don't want is for the information that we share, the information that we comprise and put together in this playbook, to get into the hands of those who are for our detriment, who want to see our downfall, who are pro taking away our rights, freedoms, and liberties, especially us as people of color. So yeah, it's going to be an exclusive project. It's not going to be available for everyone, but for those of you who want to be a part of it, please stay tuned. There's going to be some accountability. So everyone is going to have to play a part, and and if you're not playing your part, then we can't have you a part of this project. This is life or death for many of us. And so my project 2029, more information about that is coming. But just transitioning for a moment, just to talk about why I talk about politics and blend that with my faith. It's because of what I've seen happening over the past several years within the church, and so many people drawing themselves away from the church because of what they see in the church. On one side, they see the church being this place, especially I'm just going to say it the way I know how to say it, in the predominantly white churches, in these conservative Christian churches, these evangelical Christian churches. They see this political agenda, this pro MAGA agenda being played out Sunday after Sunday, and they don't want any part of that, so they push away from that. And then on the other side, they also see the church being silent while people are dying in the streets, while people's rights and liberties and freedoms are being taken away just constantly. The church is being silent and is offering no aid, because there are so many pastors out there who are saying, well, I don't want to get involved because I don't want to offend anyone, because I got people on the left and the right in my congregation, so I'm just going to stay silent. This is not the time to stay silent. I'm not saying to preach your politics across the pulpit. I'm not saying that your church it needs to endorse a candidate over another. Absolutely not. You should not. But you do have a personal right and liberty to speak your mind, pastors. You do have a personal right and liberty, Christians, to speak your mind, because the other side is. And so for those of us who are being silent, your silence speaks louder than your voice. And what people who want to be a part of the faith but are drawing away from it, what they see from your silence is that that's not a place for me. That's not a safe space for me. And so that's why I'm using my voice in this way. And so that's why I'm so critical of some of the things that I see within so-called Christians and their allegiance to this MAGA movement. And speaking of this MAGA movement, we see 4547's cabinet nominations coming through on a daily basis. Is constantly seeing him select people for his cabinet, and I'm not going to call out any of their names, but just to hear who they are and what they've done and what they will now be responsible for is scary. You have a pro wrestling personality nominated to his cabinet. You have someone who has spoken and played cozy with Vladimir Putin in his cabinet. You have someone who plays patty cake and plays nice with neo-Nazi organizations. You have people who are under investigation for everything from sex trafficking to, money laundering. Some of everything that I've seen from his cabinet picks is just a clown circus. It truly is the worst of the worst, and so we really have to stay prayed up, and just be hopeful that there's enough courage in Congress to say, you know what, we can't ride with this. Even though we're Republicans, even though we've been riding with 45, 47, we cannot sign off on some of these selections. And so I want to ask this question to the pro-Trump pastors and the pro-Trump churches out there, because of course there's this huge movement, especially once 45, 47 gets back in office, of him doing just these mass deportations, and just blaming all of these immigrants coming from the southern border for the ills of this country, blaming them for the high crime rates and for Americans not having jobs. And we all know that cannot be no further from the truth. Of course, with any group of people, there's going to be some bad apples. We hear the Republicans say that about police officers. Oh, there's just a few bad apples, but they're all not bad. We hear that all the time. So the same goes for immigrants. And the problem I have with this incoming administration is that they're focusing on only one type of immigrant. Immigrants who come from South America, Mexico, Latino descent. But immigrants come from all over the world into the United States. And they're all not coming here legally. We saw an influx of Ukrainian immigrants come to this country over the past few years for what? Asylum, for safety. And there's nothing wrong with that. But they didn't have any papers. They didn't go through any of the legal channels to get here. They just got on a bus and then on a plane, and they just were here. So what's the difference between someone from Ukraine seeking asylum from the dangers that are happening in their country than someone from Honduras, El Salvador, Venezuela fleeing from violence in their home country, seeking safety, seeking asylum? What is the difference? Oh, come on, let's be real. The only difference that we see is the color of their skin and where they come from. But I want to ask this question to those pastors out there who are all for this mass deportation, and because I've spoken to Christians, conservative Christians, who say that they're all for these mass deportations and these people are nothing but criminals and they need to be sent back to their countries. I want to ask you this, Christians, conservative MAGA Christians, pastors. If one of these immigrants who you say is, a criminal and need to be deported, send them back to their home country, if one of them knocked on the doors of your church and came in seeking to be saved, seeking to accept Jesus Christ as their personal Lord and Savior, they didn't speak English. They don't have a green card. They don't have the documents that make it legal for them to be in this country, but they walked into your church doors because they were looking for a safe space after maybe being abused in their home country, after maybe being raped or threatened with their lives. And they walked into your church and said, I want to know Jesus. I want Jesus to be my Lord and Savior. I want him to be the head of my life. what would you do? What would you do? Would you look at that brown-skinned immigrant and say, go away? Or would you look at that immigrant and say, and call ICE, call the police? We got a illegal immigrant in our church. Come take them away. Come deport them. Or would you usher them into a life with Jesus? Would you, if they were hungry, would you feed them? Would you, if they were homeless, offer them shelter? Or would you just hold on to your pro-MAGA beliefs because that's so important to you and have them deported? One decision is what a Christian would do. The other decision is what a MAGA Christian would do. So what would the Christian do? Well, we can find that if we go straight to the book that we all believe in and we trust to guide our lives, the Holy Bible. Let's go to Romans chapter 12, verse 13. Christians, conservative Christians. It says, contribute to the needs of the saints and extend hospitality to strangers. That means people you don't know, people who don't look like you, people who are not from where you're from. Extend hospitality to them. Can you extend hospitality to someone and have them deported? Can you extend hospitality to someone who wants a relationship with Jesus and have them sent back to the dangers in their home country? Is that really extending hospitality as what is said here in the book of Romans? Oh, but let's not stop there. Let's go also to the book of Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 1 through 3 says, let mutual love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers. There it is again. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing that some have entertained angels without even knowing it. Remember those who are in prison as though you were in prison with them. Those who are being tortured as if yourselves were being tortured. Put yourselves in their shoes. Put yourselves in their shoes that you were fleeing, trying to find a safe space for you and your family. And your country didn't provide that. Your country was filled with drug cartels and violence and a dictator of a president. Well, we're almost there right now. And you wanted to flee from that to find a place where there was freedom. Freedom to speak. Freedom to live however you wanted to live. Freedom to make a living and make a better life for you and your family. That's all these people are looking for. But we're not done. One more. 3 John. 3 John, not 3 John, as 45-47 would call it. But 3 John chapter 1, verse 5 says, beloved, you do faithfully whatever you do for the friends. Even though they are strangers to you, they have testified to your love before the church. You do well to send them on in a manner worthy of God. Let me repeat that. You do well if you send them on in a manner worthy of God. For they began their journey for the sake of Christ, accepting no support from non-believers. Therefore, we ought to support such people so that they may become co-workers in the truth. Co-workers in the truth means basically so that they may become brothers and sisters in the faith. Can you see that illegal immigrant as your brother and sister in the faith. Christians. Remember what that word Christian means. It means to be of Christ. It means to be like Christ, to be in his image. Are we really portraying his image by rejecting people, by denying people? Yeah, there's bad apples, but the majority of those people who are coming here, they're not taking anyone's jobs. The jobs that they do have are jobs that most Americans do not want. They're not coming here to rob, steal, kill, and rape our daughters or anything like that. They're coming here for a better life. Because the life that they had in their home country, they may have ended up dead, homeless, on the street. Anything could happen to them and their family. Families separated. Young girls being trafficked at the age of 9 and 10 years old. That's what they're fleeing from. And they think that the United States of America is that safe space. And now we're at a point that here in the United States, we're telling them, no, we're not a safe space for you. We're even worse than the country that you came from. That's who we are. That's who we are. And that's how we're displaying ourselves as Christians. I got to be honest that there have been times I have said that I am disgusted with Christians. Even though I am one. There have been so many times I said I am disgusted with Christians because of how we portray ourselves to the rest of the world. We portray ourselves as these God-loving, God-honoring, God-fearing people, but we act in such a different way. And we want to force our faith on others. Right now, we see in several states, including Texas, where they're forcing to put the Bible in classrooms and teaching the 10 Commandments. But what about those children who are not Christian, who don't come from Christian households? What is wrong with being a Muslim and practicing Islam? What is wrong with being Hindu? What is wrong with being anything that's non-Christian, but still respectful and is not threatening to anyone's lives? What is wrong with that? Because if the tables were turned, we wouldn't want anyone forcing us to read the Quran. We wouldn't want anyone to force us to practice Buddhism. So why do we, as Christians, American Christians, force people to believe what we believe? It's insane. It's so hypocritical the way that we treat one another. And so I'm going to end with this. I'm going to end with this. I'm going to keep this one short because I can feel my voice going out, and I still got some more packing to do. I'm so ready to start this vacation. I saw a podcast, and yes, as a podcast host, I watch other podcasts. But I saw a podcast last week, and the gospel artist Fred Hammond was the guest on this podcast. And for those who know me, know I love me some Fred Hammond. I've been rocking with Fred Hammond for at least 35 years, since his days with Commission, on to his solo projects, with Radical for Christ, and on all the way up until today. I love Fred Hammond. His music, honestly, I can say this, and Uncle Fred, if you happen to see this, let me just say that your music is part of the reason why I am a Christian today. Your music is a reason why I am unashamed of the faith. I'm unashamed to preach the gospel. Because as a young adult in my late teens, 19, going into 20, 21 years old, your music transformed me because I was feeling myself being drawn away from the church because I'm hearing this music in the world that has me nodding my head. Like I like the beat. Maybe the lyrics weren't favorable to what I was believing in my heart, but I was drawn to it because the beat, the melody, the harmonies. It was just so dope, and it drew me in. And then I heard Fred Hammond. In the early 90s, I was in an R&B group, so we were singing these love songs and had these beautiful harmonies, trying to emulate Boys to Men and Jodeci and all these singing groups. And then I heard Fred Hammond sing "No Weapon Formed Against Me," and it had the same melodies and harmonies and that these R&B songs would have, and it drew me in, and I finally found someone to listen to who made me feel like it's okay to be young and a Christian at the same time. I didn't have to wait till I was 40 or 50 years old to come to the faith. I could do it right now, because let's be honest, music has a way of just motivating us, moving us, inspiring us, encouraging us. And so I just wanted to thank you, Fred, for that. So if you just happen to see this, I love you, my brother, and thank you so much for the decades of just bomb music that you put out. But back to what I was saying. In this podcast, Fred said something that really just shook me to my core, and it just made me I had to pause the podcast for a moment just to sit and think about what he said. And he said it so quickly, it was like, it was something that, he endured and experienced, and as he was telling his story, but he didn't, I don't know if he realized the word gem that he just dropped on so many people. And so he was just talking about, some of the struggles, that he went through in his personal life. And he finally got to a point where he asked himself this question. He said, "Who am I when God's not watching? Who am I when God's not watching?" And when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, that's what I needed to hear. Because there are some times in our lives, now let's be clear, there's never a time that God is not watching. That's clear. He's always present, always knowing, so omnipresent, all these things. We know that. But to ask the question, who am I when God's not watching? Because we live our lives sometimes as if there's these pockets in our lives where God's not watching. God's not seeing this part of my life. I know I portray myself in one way, but in this little pocket of my life, and in this little closet that I'm going to put myself in, and behind closed doors, he's not seeing this because the world doesn't see it. So God doesn't see it. So who am I in that moment? And we all have that point where there are certain things about our lives, there's certain things that we do that we think that God's not watching, or we hope that he does not see what it is that we're doing. And we have to come to a point where we say, even those things that we do that we think where God is not present, that he's not watching, or we're hiding something from God. There is nothing that we can hide from God. So I want you to ask yourself that question. Who are you when God's not watching? And then come back to the reality that he's always watching. And those things that you've said, those things that you've done, even those things that you've thought, God has seen, God has heard it all from you. And here's the kicker. He still loves you. He still loves you. So yeah, I'm hard on, some of these, MAGA Republican Christians. Because who are you when God's not watching? Who are you to say certain people don't belong in this country? Who are you to say that that diversity, equity, inclusion is a bad thing? Who are you to say that women shouldn't have control of their own bodies? Who are you to erase history? You see the shirt. Who are you to do that when you know Jesus himself would not do what it is that you're doing? Jesus himself would not support a candidate like a 45-47 who talks about grabbing women by the genitals, who talks about other countries being S-hole type of countries, who just continuously talks bad about people who don't agree with him, who has called his opponents sons of bitches. This is not a Christ-like person. This is someone who needs to be asking the question himself, who am I when God's not watching? And repent from those things. I'm at a point right now where I'm asking myself that question on a daily basis. Who am I when God's not watching? What are those things in my life that I do, that I say, that I think, that I know is against God's will, that disappoints God, that breaks his heart? When will I turn from those things? Who am I when God's not watching? Who are you when God's not watching? We know that he's always watching. So let's be mindful of that. Be mindful of the way we treat people. Be mindful of the way we act. Be mindful of even the way that we think, even the way that we think politically. Who are you when God's not watching? So that's a wrap on today's Refinery podcast. I hope that this final question, I know it's a difficult question, but I hope that on the other side, when you come out of the refinery, you come out a little bit better. You come out a little bit stronger. You come out a little bit more loving and kind to people who you don't know, extending hospitality to those strangers. So once again, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to this podcast, to this YouTube channel. I hope that this has encouraged you, has blessed you. And even if it got on your nerves, even if it, may have rubbed you the wrong way, even if you're in your feelings, it's okay. I appreciate you anyway. I love you anyway. And I pray that we can come to some type of understanding to where we're all better, because that's what the refinery is all about. Now I'm going to sign off. I'm going to be off for the next 2 weeks, enjoying some time away on a true and real vacation. And I pray that during this Thanksgiving time that you have a wonderful and blessed Thanksgiving holiday with your family and with your friends. It's not about the food. It's not about the football games or anything like that, but it's truly about being thankful for where you are. And maybe you're not where you want to be in life. Maybe everything is not a bed of roses right now. I can truly say that for myself. But being thankful for where you are right now, being thankful for where God has you, being thankful for the people that you have in your life. And you may not think that you have a lot. You may not think that you have, all that you need. You may not think you have people in your corner. But the fact that you're able to watch this podcast episode, whether it's on your phone, whether you're sitting in front of a computer, whether you're listening to it while you're on the go, the fact that you have this ability means that you're blessed, means that you're fortunate. And so be thankful for those little things so that you can be thankful later for those great blessings that are on the way for you. And I believe that. I believe that for each and every one of us, no matter what's going on in Washington, D.C., God is still in control. And there are some great and marvelous things in store for each of us. So be thankful for what you have now, because God is still in the blessing business. And he will bless you. He will increase you. So enjoy this holiday season. Enjoy this Thanksgiving with your family and friends. Eat until you're full and stuff. And then go out and love somebody. Go out and extend some love and hospitality to a stranger. This is the time of season where we should be showing love and kindness. So I challenge you to go do that, because that's what I'm going to do. God bless you. Thank you for joining us in the Refinery. I'm your host, Trey Everett. I'll be back in a couple weeks with another episode of the Refinery. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Let's send this out. Let's get to 500. At least let's get to 500 subscribers by the end of 2024. You can help me do that by subscribing and sharing this with your friends and family and loved ones. God bless you. I'll see you next time in the Refinery. Peace.
45, 47.